I would love to welcome Bill Jarrard to the stage. Hey. Okay, quick intro. So Bill and I have known each other for around 11 years now, and Bill focuses on deliberate creative thinking and how to use that as a leader and within a corporation.
Thank you very much, Lauren. What's interesting today, guys, is we're talking about leadership. Are you okay with that? Good. I'm going to talk to you a little bit differently than, say, some of the other people that have been talking to you about things, because I want to take you on a sort of a private journey that's really about where I'm ending up with right now. There we go. All right. So what I want to do is we want to look at this idea of leadership. And when Lauren said to me, Bill, because she knows me a lot, she sort of talks to me a little bit like I'm her dad, which is kind of interesting because she thinks of Jen more as her sister. So it means I'm old. But one of the things she said to me, Bill, tell people your story. Tell people what happened and how you got to where you are, because it's a great leadership story. So what I wanted to do is I said, well, what's that all about? What's this idea of a leadership journey? What's it all about? And as I was thinking about it, I started to think about the things I've learned over the period of time that I've been doing things. And I was trying to figure out, how do you become a leader and what is it all about? And are you, in fact, this nature versus nurture kind of thing? How does that come into the whole process? And are leaders by nature naturally leaders? Are they nurtured that way? Is it something that they determine themselves? And what about opportunities? So what I want to do is I want to sort of take you on a little bit of a journey through those kind of things as we go through. Now, by now you would have picked up that I have a bit of an accent. I'm from a place called Winnipeg in Canada. Has anybody ever heard of it? Excellent. Then you know why I live here. Because as you can see, Winnipeg looks kind of nice there, doesn't it? But it isn't always nice. That's the Winnipeg I remember. And in fact, in the newspapers not that long ago, they were talking about it was colder in Winnipeg than it is on Mars. So, yeah, it's a bit chilly. The day I left was the 15th of February, 1972, and it was 43 below zero. So it's a great place to be from. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey as we go forward. I was actually born there and grew up there. And I have this slide because, again, it's part of how you get formed. One of the things I developed very young was, about this age, in fact, about 6 months old, I got polio as a child. And polio was a debilitating disease, and I never really thought very much about it until actually just a few years ago when I started putting it together, but also talked about how I became who I am and the kind of individual I am. And I have this picture of myself and my younger brother, Rob. And I have that up there because, can you imagine, here it was 1953, 54, 55. My mom has me. I get polio in 6 months of age. My brother's born a year later with cerebral palsy and a club foot. So you got 2 kids in disabled kind of form. And how does that put it together? And again, I never really thought very much about it at all until I started thinking about it in terms of innovation terms. And one of the interesting things about it is, this is an example I look at in innovation all the time about how polio was, if you like, conquered in much of the world. And I don't know if you realize it, but between about 1930s, 40s, and into about 1955, polio affected more than 100,000 children every summer in North America alone. 1954, 100,000 children got polio, 20% or so died. 1955, none. It's a story of entrepreneurship and innovation. And so one of the things I do is I build that in. It's a bit of a background about how it's formed. This is kind of an unusual picture, but it speaks to this idea of entrepreneurship and when entrepreneurship begins. And it's really kind of interesting to me because at one stage, you know, when I was really young, I used to love it when it snowed. Because as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, I would go out and shovel walks. And you'd earn money doing that, right? It's like a job. By the time I was in my early teens, 13 or 14, I thought this idea of going out and pushing newspapers around the place and shoveling walks, that was just too hard work. So I thought, what's a better way of doing it? And one of the things I came up with is this idea here. This is sort of a plastic grape. So you can see the picture of them there. The reason I still have them is because I'd actually given them to my grandmother. This is 47 years ago, and I just got them back about 15 years ago when she passed away. But they're important to me because they tell the story of entrepreneurship. You see, when I was about 14, I discovered how to make those sorts of things. And what I would do is I would develop them and make them into different kinds of things. And I made different lamps and different shades and all sorts of things, and I'd do it on commission. With these kind of things, what I would do is I'd make them and take to my dad's work, and I'd sell lottery tickets or raffle tickets for them. And so I'd make something for $10 and sell it for $25. And so I was 13, 14 years. That was a lot easier than shoveling walks, would you agree? So it sets the scene. So again, I'm talking about how do we develop as entrepreneurs? How do we develop in this kind of way? But that sort of brings me to this whole issue of Australia. For those of you who don't know where Winnipeg is, there it is sort of right up there in the middle of nowhere. This is the ship I came over, been mothballed a long time ago. Came around this way, 17 days coming to Australia by ship. So yes, I am a boat person, but a different kind of boat person. What was interesting for me is when we came here, this was what greeted me. This is a picture I took of the Sydney Opera House. Can you see the crane still above it? So that's how long ago this was. So it's that kind of thing. So the story is about movement and travel and things like that. And it's how you come to a country and what you receive when you get to it as the nature of things. Yeah. Kind of scary, isn't it? There I was, 19 years old. 19 years old. And what's interesting about that is at 19 years old, I developed the travel bug. I learned a few things. And then it was about self-determination. Because remember, I'm talking about, are we natured? Is it nurtured or self-determination? And what happened is, around about the time I was 21 years old, I read this book. And I still have the book here. And it's sort of sits pride of place in where I have. So this is this book that I read. And in it, there was a discussion about when you should settle down, when you should become committed to careers. I was 21 years old, and I made an absolute decision to myself that I would never look for a serious job until I was 30. And so I spent the rest of my 20s traveling all over the world. So I traveled all over the world until I had to do things. So in those travel days, I went and lived in London for a while. And I loved it in London because I was doing all sorts of things. While I lived there, I managed to go over to Paris a lot because I love Paris. And I traveled around Europe in a Volkswagen van like you always did, etc., things like that. And so it was an interesting time to learn about things. And you talk about people who you network with and people you can team up with. This is what I learned about life and things that you did. But then I read another book by that same author. This one was about, in this case, the history of the Middle East and Israel in particular. And as a result of that, I went to Israel. And I volunteered and lived on a kibbutz for a while and was in an archaeological dig. And again, what I was showing myself is how am I exploring the world, learning about new cultures, new ways of doing things, and in fact developing this idea of leadership as I move forward. So that was sort of those travel years, but things started to change. I came back to Melbourne went to Vancouver in 1976 to 80, and basically just hung out. But in 1980, I came back to Australia. Now, you remember what I said? At 21 years of age, I made a decision I wouldn't look for a serious job till I was 30. Remember that? Guess what? I was getting older. By the time about 1983 came along, we had our first child on the way. This is my daughter, Kylie. I knew then that I probably had to get a job. Desperate times, I can tell you. Desperate times. But I managed to get a job, and I went and worked with an organization, and I had a job there for about 8 years in a career. I started as a senior analyst, ended up as a chief manager at a big corner office in that area, working on a whole range of things, studied leadership with people like the Williamson Community Leadership Program. But here's the key when I was learning this stuff, because I was what they would call an entrepreneur. Have you heard of entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurs are people who make a difference inside. And I was fortunate because, again, this nurturing side of things comes into it because I had a great mentor. And I recommend that every one of you always get yourself a great mentor if you can. I had a great mentor. His name was Alan Finlay. And he basically hired me into the first job that I had because I knew nothing about it. And every job he ever gave me after that, he gave it to me because I knew nothing about it. Because therefore, it had to be reinvented. And he only gave me 2 rules to live by, to work by. And he said, Bill, where there's chaos, there's opportunity. Where there's chaos, there's opportunity. So go to the chaos. What a good lesson for entrepreneurship. Find out where there's chaos. Find out where the need is and seek out the opportunity. But then he gave me the second part of that. And he said, Bill, you never know how far you can go until you get your fingers burnt. So go out and get your fingers burnt. Now, that was my boss. Go out and get your fingers burnt. Again, I think great lessons from a leadership point of view about how we can tackle things and how we put things together. So those were my days. Those were my creative days and working for a living. What happened after that, of course, was I became successfully unemployed. And I have been successfully unemployed since 1991, happily and successfully unemployed. And I started a number of different businesses doing different things. But then something happened in 1997 that changed everything for me. Because at that stage in time, I had ended a relationship with my wife at the time. I was moving between things. And the reason I did that is because people were starting to tell me it was things I couldn't do anymore. I couldn't do things. And then I met a woman who, when we first met, at the beginning of 1997, and we talked and got to know each other, it demonstrated to me that as I looked at what she was able to do, that there was nothing that was impossible. Nothing was impossible to this woman. Nothing was impossible with her. And so we became great friends, and we did a whole range of things together. And what I'd like you to do now is actually introduce you to that woman, if I could. Jennifer Goddard, would you please come up? So this is...
I've got one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm organized. Yeah. All right. I met Bill New Year's Day. I thought I'd got to get a life. I was single mum, working full-time, studying part-time here at RMIT. I had to get a life, and I met Bill, and I was explaining to Bill, who's ever read something, completely forgotten what they read? 5 minutes later, yeah. Who's got a poor memory? Oh, yeah. Okay, who has parents older than them? Okay, just checking, see who's awake, who's not awake, yeah. So I met Bill, and I had real trouble studying. I was doing a Bachelor of Business here at RMIT, and at one point when we met that night, we went out for dinner, and he said he always wanted to go to Nepal, and I said I'd always wanted to go to Nepal. So guess what? We ended up going to Nepal. He'd always been told that he couldn't do it because of the polio in his legs, and we just went, and I had no money. I was broke. I was working full-time, a single mum, studying part-time, but we sort of did it. We went in November, so that was really sort of cool. It's a real journey day today, isn't it? It's all about our lives and things like that. I suppose I wanted to share my life because that's what Lauren told me to do. But this is me on the left there. I had eyesight problems. I had hearing problems. I went to about 20 schools all around Australia when I was a kid, had real troubles learning. I'm dyslexic, but I didn't find that out. I was told it was about 20. And I left home when I was 15. And this is me. It's just turns 18, I think it is. This is my daughter Jasmine, and this is my reason for living. This is my purpose, my passion, my vision. I was going to adopt her out, but I decided to keep her, and then I had to sort of demonstrate leadership and get a proper job and proper work in order to be able to support her and give her the lifestyle that she could have had. That's her now. She's now 33 and a lawyer, a very, very successful lawyer. Too successful, I actually have to hire a lawyer to win an argument with her. I'm screwed if we ever get into an argument. But I put all my energies and efforts, my whole career was about earning money so she could have private schools. And I work, like Bill, I work with a couple of very good mentors. And Bill ended up becoming my mentor because when I was in my early 30s, that's me there, I was just amazed. I was putting these two photos together, and that's my daughter on the left and me on the right at the same age. I thought it was really, really spooky. But that was me when I met Bill, and fairly young, naive. Even though I had a 15-year-old, I still didn't know much about the world and about business. I was lucky I got into a career in telecommunications at a very young age, at 16, and I worked my way up. So here, studying at RMIT, I had real troubles learning, and I said to Bill, I'm going to quit uni. Who do I think I am? You know, I got to my early 30s without a degree. I've been working full-time, studying part-time, and he sort of said, why don't you try my map? And what the hell's a mind map? Anyone used mind maps or seen mind maps before? Okay, cool. And they're actually invented by Tony Buzan, who helped people with learning difficulties. And so on our first date, Bill gave me the mind map book when I walked in the door. No roses, no chocolates, just the mind map book. Really cool. But what I learned from that is that learning how to learn is the most important thing. What we're learning, your guys are learning, is stuff. Facts, figures, data, and stuff. And we're up to here with stuff. How about learning how we learn, then learn the stuff? And that's what I got really passionate about. So I started using mind maps, and I started learning speed reading techniques and a whole range of other different things. So, because taking notes like this is a 500 or more old technology. It's like trying to use this in today's world. Now, I know you guys are a little bit too young to actually really have them, but you know, my grandma, or actually we used to use this. In my desk in the 1980s, that was the phone that I had, literally, and I worked for Telstra. That was the phone that I used. So A mind map is just a roadmap of key information. You could use this for your pitch, you can use it for product overviews, you can use it as a memory tool and technique. So this is just one I use for my CV, who I am, what I'm passionate about, I love to travel, my qualifications, the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, which we'll come to, where I've worked. I've been lucky. I just came back from Kuwait last week. That was the first time I worked in Kuwait, country number 22. Very excited. Because that's what I wanted to do, because, you know, I did everything wrong. I got married, I had a baby, got married. My husband died when my daughter was a baby, then went to university and then started traveling. So I did the traveling bit, way too old. But my philosophy was about standing on the shoulders of giants and about learning is something you can easily learn. I've worked in a number of areas in telcos all around the world, done a lot of IT consulting and project management. I've done a number of startups. And a weird thing is I was the chief judge at the World Memory Championships because I got really fascinated by memory, and memory is a skill that you can easily develop. So I have some very geeky friends who can do some amazing memory things. But memory is an important part of what you're doing if you're pitching. How to remember. I worked with Lauren with one of her clients and showed them how they can memorize their pitch just by using the four corners of the room. It took us, 5 minutes to do that. So it's a technique that you can easily learn. So that's a mind map. And that's just all it is like the inside cover of the street directory, the big picture, the overview, and you know where to go to for information. If it's sort of like Queensland, I'm in Melbourne, Melways, yes. I'm thinking Rafidex. So it can be a whole book summarized in one page. It could be anything. So it's whether from a study skills perspective, a creativity perspective, or as an entrepreneur. Mind maps are the Swiss Army knife for your brain. And it switched me from getting 52% for one of my subjects, just before I met Bill, to get distinctions and high distinctions. I ended up getting my degree of distinction, and then the MEI, I got 8 out of 11 high distinctions and 2 top student awards. And I actually used a mind map to prepare my assignment for my strategic negotiations and relationships, because I was freaking out that I'm going to fail, and I got 40 out of 40. And I freaked out that I got 40 out of 40. But I had the mind map, I had the tools to actually do my assignment. So that's what it was. About 3 weeks after Bill and I met, he took me to a presentation by Edward de Bono. And I'm sitting there, anyone heard of Edward de Bono? He coined the phrase lateral thinking. I'm going, I can learn to think, I can learn to be creative. So that's when it really inspired me that thinking is a skill you can easily learn.
Thank you. One of the things that we did, and we've gone through our backgrounds very, very quickly, because we wanted to get to this point in our journey at this stage, because it's at this stage that Jen and I started doing things together and hooking up with people like Van de North, who headed up the Busan Centers worldwide, and Edward de Bono, who's the creator of lateral thinking and a range of other thinking tools. And what we've learned from these guys was that opportunity is one of the most important things you can get to. And so what we're trying to look at here is the way in which Jen and I have both become our natural backgrounds, where we came from, how we were nurtured in different ways and shapes or form, the self-determination that we put forward and how we put it together. But what was it all aimed at? A lot of it was about opportunities and how we could move forward in doing things. And so what we had to do is start to determine things and see how we could actually move forward in those things. And so it was just shortly after we met Edward, and we did a range of other things, that we started to talk about where we were going to go as far as a business goes. And Jen just showed you a simple mind map. There is my mind map there that I did in June '98 to design a new kind of business. We spotted an opportunity, we saw a new kind of business, and that area was in this area of deliberate creative thinking, that ability to turn your creativity on at will and put it into way. Now, a lot of thinking went into this whole process, but what we had to do was we had to sort of see the big picture. So for those of you that are doing the planning processes to make things into realities, then this is the kind of thing we were looking at. Now, can you imagine having put that together now, and you've got everything you're doing, and we hiked it around to all sorts of different places, and we actually said to them...
angel investors.
Angel investors. We took it to accountants. We took it to all sorts of people. And we knew we had a business. Do you reckon you're going to get the funding? A bit of a challenge, right? So what you then have to do is take it into action, and that's part of what we did. We actually turned this whole thing into a strategic plan that had everything thought through. And one of the things we can do is break this whole thing down, and this is just a couple of pages out of it. It was an 8-page executive summary that, quite frankly, blew people out of the water. And what I'm prepared to offer you guys later is anybody wants a copy of this, I'm happy to give it to you, because it just demonstrates the kind of thing that can put together. What we were trying to do is design a business for our particular purpose. And while this is a program about, high growth ventures and things like that, Jen and I, when we started off, we wanted to create a company that would allow us to have the lifestyle that we wanted to have. And so when we set ourselves what we're going to call the company, how we're going to put it together, I came up with the name MindWorks, how your mind works and how we can put it. And Jen said, let's add international on it. MindWorks International.
Because I wanted to travel.
And the reason for it is that we wanted to travel. You see, we weren't looking to be rich. We wanted to enjoy our life together and things like that. And so part of this was seeing things and how we could move forward. And so have we been successful? The answer is these are all the places we've worked so far. And some of the places we worked have been pretty interesting stories. As an example, Beijing. I can remember flying up to Beijing with a client that I'd done work with in a number of places around the world, and they flew me up business class, and we had to go in. We had a nice Peking duck dinner in Beijing, and then for 4 hours I was with them in the morning, and then got back on the plane and flew back. And you think, well, that's a pretty quick trip. Nothing. Phoenix. They wanted me to go to Phoenix. 1 hour keynote. Whew. How important am I? And then
the Reserve Bank of South Africa flew me business class to their statisticians conference to speak on creativity and innovation for 30 minutes. So I flew all the way to Johannesburg, 2 hours up to their conference, and then that was just sort of 30 minutes. But
now that sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? Not so much. But what we do, though, is we say, no, we're not going to go for half an hour. No, we're not going to go for a 45-minute keynote. We're coming to Phoenix because we want to speak at your conference, but we also want to do some other things while we're there. And so we negotiated 2 weeks. They paid for our week at Disney World. They flew us around the country. We did everything else. So we got our fee plus everything else. Our very first client when we started in 1999, formally, was the Young Entrepreneurs Organization in Manila. So what we did is we created a business that gives us the lifestyle we want it to live. So again, it's about defining success. How you define your success and how you put it together, that's part of what we were looking at. But of course, things keep going and we change. And both Jen and I, and we studied with Lauren, and I lectured the MEI for 10 years here in Israel, in Hong Kong, and still lecturing on this subject in a couple of different universities. But what we did is we took this opportunity to go back and study in this time period, about 2004, 2005, in order to develop a new kind of business, to change the way in which we could see things. Because again, we were looking for opportunities, always looking for opportunities. And we did that when we started to look together to create a new business up in China. And again, you're seeing a similar sort of approach. Our mind map plan of what do we put together to go up in China. And again, we put it into place as far as a strategy goes, a document that was fully in place to make this all happen. Now, when we got it, Jen got her 100% mark from Jason on the negotiations. When Jen and I and Mike presented this to the venture capital people and things like that, we got 100% out of 100. 100% on the presentation and our processes. One
of the interesting things was we based our assumptions on whether Tony Buzan would allow us to work with him to take it into China, because there's about 250 million high school students in China, and we hadn't actually validated that assumption. So we were there Sunday afternoon. I was in Brisbane on Saturday. I rang my mum and said, I'll be in Australia for the rest of the week, so feel free to call me. And we realised we hadn't validated the assumption, so the boys stuck me on a plane to Beijing to meet with Tony to present this whole plan to him and to see whether he would actually do that. So then we could actually then say, yes, we had approval and were able to go ahead with the actual business.
So for our assignment, Mike and I put Jen on an airplane where she went and spent 3 days with Tony talking about how we could put this together. So when you think about your commitment to your assignments, have a think about stuff like that, because it's about passion, about what you do with things. And again, it's about how you develop your brain and how you put things together. And Jen's focus for the last few years is very much into this brain development. And Lauren's asked her to develop your brains a little bit. Are you ready to do that? You might as well say yes, because it's going to happen.
She said, oh, could you just slip in a few minutes on, remembering names and faces and things like that? Yeah, okay, sure, yeah. It wasn't until I read this article, I'm not sure it's Dr. Daniel Amen, or Amen. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know, my jokes aren't bad. To develop brain envy. I was envious of everybody else's brain. Because I had such poor schooling and worked my way up, I thought everybody else was smarter than me. Everybody had a better memory than me. Everyone was doing better assignments than me. And it can train your brain to be even better. It is a skill. Tony Buzan realizes that if I can train my muscles like this, well, I can train this muscle. And this is just at the start of the neuroplasticity era about 10 years ago. And when we started with MindWorks, the whole era of creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship was really just taking off in June 98. So it's something you can easily develop. Now, one of the things is, as I mentioned, I was the chief judge of the World Memory Championships. And I don't know if you saw the documentary with Todd Sampson, Redesign My Brain. He's a really interesting character, a really interesting entrepreneur. He's a science major, and he's the CEO of Leo Burnett. And he went in 2012 to develop his brain, learnt to juggle, learnt to do a number of different things, and it had this massive impact. This documentary won the Australian Documentary of the Year. So it was an amazing documentary. It was a privilege to work on that with him all throughout that process. But memory is a skill you can easily develop. Remembering names and faces is an important thing. Who's can remember someone's face but not their name? Yeah, because you need to know, are you part of my tribe? Are you a friend or a foe? Are you going to, in the old days, are you going to eat me or beat me, or are you going to be part of my tribe? So it's really important to remember the name nowadays rather than just the face. But 5 different parts of our brain light up to remember someone's face but not the name. There's nothing on my face that says Jennifer. Though I actually do have it in Arabic, and I am promised it does say Jennifer in Arabic. Yes. So I came a specialist in memory. I got a phone call from Nova, and Husey and Kate wanted to do an interview. I'd been in Perth, hadn't quite been listening what was happening. Apparently they got caught not knowing the staff's names. As an entrepreneur, knowing the staff, knowing the people, knowing the gatekeepers, remembering the secretaries' names of the VCs or whoever, remembering people's names is really important. And apparently they got caught out because they worked from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and they ran into someone and the staff members didn't know their name and got in a lot of trouble. So they brought on the memory expert to have a bit of a discussion about it. And I thought, oh, that was really cool. Until I it was fascinating that at 6 a.m. I got my publicist with me. I really haven't had my morning coffee, but we were making coffees and everyone was coming up. And I thought, gee, there's lots of people on the program at this time of the morning. And I met all this Lucy and Olive and all these other people. And it wasn't until this guy bounded around the corner and said, hi, my name's Steve, I'm the sports commentator, and bolted. I went, oh, crap, I'm being set up. Because, being the memory guru, everyone expects me to have a good memory. I go to conferences and they go, oh, you're the memory person. Yeah, what's my name? They go, John. Damn. This sort of thing. Because I have to be prepared. I have to be on my game. So halfway through the interview, it was actually funny, Husey said he has a shocking memory. I said, no, you've got a fantastic memory. And you all have a fantastic memory. You remember to come today. Remember to get dressed. Thank you. All the things you do remember. And for him as a comedian, memory is an important part, remembering all the jokes. But do you know why the comedy festivals on at the moment? Every comedian will start what their name is and they'll end with their name because that's their branding. They know you're going to forget their name unless they repeat it. Or you're going to go, who was that guy? So anyway, halfway through the interview, they started trucking all these people in. 10 people. And they said, oh, Jennifer, can you remember their names? And I went, yes, I can. Because that's what I did. Because what I did when I started, when I walked in there, I knew I wanted to prime my brain. I wanted to remember the people's names. So I said, okay, as I'm going to meet someone, I'm going to remember their name. I'm going to be focused and have attention. So the step 1 is to prime your brain. And even if you're in a meetings, like with emails and things like that, when I went to Kuwait, I had all my participants. I was there for a 2-day workshop, and I looked at all their names. I knew exactly who was going to be there. I didn't know their faces, but all I had to do was match their face to the name. I knew their name, I knew their spelling or the pronunciation of their names as well. So I primed my brain. And then I looked at them. Because what does Mum say? Never to do when you meet someone with an interesting face. You never stare at them. Yeah. So most of us don't look at people, really get to see a good look at the people. So we want to look at them and we want to listen for the name. Now, the name doesn't even go in one ear and out the other ear, does it? It just goes straight over the head. Because apparently the most thing that everyone's thinking about as someone's being introduced to you is you're either checking them out or seeing what they're like or how am I going to introduce myself, and you're just not paying any attention whatsoever. So you've got to listen for the name. And there are 12 steps, and I'm only going to show you 5 steps in this thing because you didn't give me much time. But one of the other steps is to repeat the name as soon as you do hear it. So you've got to listen for the name. I have hearing problems, and I really got to, focus and listen for people's names, particularly people with accents as well. So, and then link their name. Link the name to someone you know, or someone who might be fairly famous, or someone, I have a sister who's Carol, or a husband who's Bill. I met a guy the other day, his name was Bill. He's my new IT, the PC doctor. And that was easy because I made that link. So you can link it to someone unusual, or about 10% of us have an unusual feature on our face that links the name. There's moly, and all those sorts of, I say mole. And 10% of us have an unusual name. Like a guy I met, his name was Hercules. Really, his name was Hercules. So he was easy to remember. The rest of the 80% of us is a bit of hard work. Now, make a link, make it a bit strange, out there. Now, does anyone know, well, you guys would know who Stephanie Germanotta is. No?
Lady Gaga.
Who's Stephanie Germanotta? Lady Gaga. That's her real name. You're very close. Yeah. So if you actually met her in a normal situation and you had to remember her name is Germanotta, you could really imagine a German flag or an otter on the corner with a German flag, or her draped in a German flag with carrying an otter beside her, couldn't you? It'd be really, really easy to remember. Maybe she should have done that instead of the meat dress, I'm not quite sure. But that's the sort of things that you can easily do to make a link or a connection or an association. That's how our brain works. It makes associations through connections. So, and the 5th tip I'm going to share with you is to exaggerate. Exaggerate the name, exaggerate the feature, exaggerate how you know them, how you met them. Just make some sort of exaggeration. That will help stick in your brain. Same with your notes. If you exaggerate your notes, if you're just writing blue pen and blue line paper, or if you're just on the computers doing the same coloured font and things like that, no exaggeration, nothing standing out, your brain is going to switch off, it's going to be bored, and your memory's going to fail you. Okay, so that was all I was going to talk about with memory. Was that useful? Well, you just go over the top. Like with Germanotta, it's like a German flag with an otter. Or you exaggerate the feature. Find something to really exaggerate. And, I'm always happy to chat with anyone who wants any advice on study skills. I've got 26 studying hacks to help people study, because I know the shit I went through trying to get my degrees and that, and that's why I sort of switched it and try to help other people now.
So one of the things we've been talking a little bit about is this idea of nature, nurture, self-determination, and opening up opportunities. And the reason I wanted Jen to be able to share her story and share some things with you is because what she didn't mention, I don't think, as I recall, that she was dyslexic, and she left school quite young and had to go back and relearn things. And of course, she then talked a little bit about going on and getting a degree and then doing her master's degree. What I also want to mention to you is she's written a number of books now with Tony Buzan and things like that. She's edited his biography. So here's someone who was not necessarily given everything to start with, wasn't all nurtured that well in the early days, and yet was able through absolute self-determination to turn things around. So what is it that's going to make people successful? How are you going to do things? And again, part of our belief system is that if you can take any of this stuff and turn it into opportunities, you're going to be in a good shape. And so the part of the challenge we want to have here is, are we ready to lead? Are you ready to lead? And are you ready to lead yourself, your organization? Are you prepared to go on your own journey and discover that journey? Whatever that's going to be, we wish you well with that kind of thing, because it's the journey that really counts in the end of the day with this whole thing. And so Lauren said to us, leave maybe 3 things that you might want to take away from our story. And I don't know whether you get anything or not from it, but a few things that we like to talk about is this idea about be prepared to take personal risk. If you're not prepared to take a risk, the chance of you being successful is unlikely. The other thing is you need to commit to learning. This idea of lifelong learning, it never stops. The human brain can continue to develop right all the way through the whole process. and then partner with other people. When you have partners like we have and like Lauren has, you can actually do just about anything at all. That's the challenge for leadership, for growth, as we look at these kind of things.
It was interesting when Bill's son was about 18, 19, we did the MBTI, and we all did it together as a family because the kids had been now old enough and in work areas. And so Bill's profile and my profile are completely opposites in a lot of respects. And his son sort of said, well, Dad, you shouldn't be in a small business. Look, your MBTI profile says that you should be in corporates and things like that. He says, but Bill said, oh yeah, but look at Jen's profile. So working with others, a partnership, it's a synergy between the two of us that has really made our business successful. Though sometimes we look at each other and go, you know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? I don't know, what do you think? So living together, working together, even studying our masters together, that was pretty interesting. But that's being able to partner with others, and what Lauren was talking about, relationships and networks with people.
So part of this challenge then is to see how you do things, and we talk about leadership for growth and growth through leadership. Part of that whole process is doing things, about taking chances. We spotted this little S-curve here just on the internet, and we wanted to show it to you because it sort of demonstrates the kind of things we would support you doing and looking at it, and that is each and every time you start to get comfortable, get yourself out of the comfort zone, get into something new, try something else, go beyond it, learn the material, try something else. And I'm 62 years old and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do when I grow up. It's just that kind of thing. So we got to sit back and say, how can we do this kind of stuff? So look at that kind of thing. And it's really about how we see things. And again, it's about perception. It is about how we perceive the world around us. And it's kind of interesting because sometimes when people see these letters in front of them, the words that they read are these words here. Other people, of course, look at those exact same letters and see these words. Would you agree with me that those are different words? It's how you see the world. And part of this idea of growth and leadership for growth is about the idea about how you see things, how you're prepared to take chances. And again, we're going to be going to the Oxford Scholar right after this, and we'd love to share some more stories with you if you want to hear them, because there's some great stories from the background. So come and join us if you can. One of the things that Lauren said we should try to make sure that we do is have some sort of idea of value exchange. And I hope we've exchanged some value with you today. I want to exchange a little bit more value with you. There's two things. First of all, if anybody is interested in seeing that business plan that we've put together, I'm very happy to give it to you. Very happy to give it to you. Here's your challenge. What you need to do is you need to send me an email at that email address, and you need to tell me one thing you've learned so far from Lauren's course. One thing you've learned from Lauren's course so that I can learn from you. Okay? The other thing I'm prepared to do, if you want to and you request it, I'm actually hosting a breakfast on Thursday morning for one of the organizations that I'm working with, and it's basically going to talk about from interesting idea to startup. Because this is Startup Week, if you're not aware. This is Startup Week, so it's spelling it. So we're having a bit of a breakfast. There's about 6 or 7 spots left at that breakfast. If anybody's interested, it doesn't cost anything. Again, email me if you're interested in talking about how do you move from an interesting idea to a startup. I'm going to be talking about how we created MindWorks and in getting other people involved in that process. So again, if you're interested, send me an email as we move forward.
And that's with Leadership Victoria, a non-for-profit organisation. So it's a real value add, a breakfast that they're putting on.
So part of this process then, guys, it's about this idea of the future belongs to those who see possibilities before they become obvious. This program that you're working with Lauren on and the speakers you're going to get to hear are people who have opened up possibilities. If you learn anything from them at all, you too will be able to do that. Thank you very much for listening to us. Are there any questions in the last 4 or 5 minutes we have left?
I'll give him the clap. Oh, a clap, sorry. Give him the clap, yeah.
Thank you.
Well done.